I'm Alexandra Kreis, and you're listening to Outer Travel in a Journey. In my own search for self-understanding, I have met people from all walks of life. I bring to you a taste of these encounters. Welcome to Outer Travel in a Journey. I'm here today with my mentor and guest, Cate Stillman. Hello, Cate. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Alexandra. I'm really glad to be here.
Yes, I'm glad you made time in your busy life. You have become somewhat of a really big entrepreneur. And for those of you who haven't heard about Cate Stillman, she is the founder of Yogahealers, which came to life around 2001. And then out of that company grew the idea of making the dinacharya, this is an Ayurvedic term, turning it into something that people can grasp more. And to life came the yoga health coaching program. That was your next big step in 2012, as I read it. And I came on board 2015, so I'm glad I caught you early there, and that I could swim along in the sea with your knowledge that then manifested in another publication, Beyond Body Thrive, which is the book that belongs to yoga health coaching. This is the Master of You, which is very recent. How recent is that really?
Yeah, March 2020.
March 2020. It was published by Sounds True, which is one of my favorite publisher. I always like to go there. It's like the reliable source, I think, for those of us on a spiritual path. So congratulations on that you really
Thank you.
So Cate, we are here together to kind of have a little bit of a nosy insight in what kind of made your life pivot around and into helping other people. And, what's your inside scoop, so to speak? What is it that really kind of gets you propelled forward?
Yeah, as a teenager, I really woke up to my own privilege. And as a global citizen, I woke up to, what was going on here on the ecosystem of planet Earth. And those two realizations around, like, I'm super privileged to even understand what I understand about this situation right now in humans' relationship to our global ecosystem and to our local ecosystems and to each other, and my sense that not that many people who have the privilege were like really willing to do something about it. But I had been exposed to people who really were. And I like those people. Like I am just on an intellectual basis and on an integrity basis, I felt a deep alignment to you can make a difference, and it requires people stepping up to make a difference. And, a lot of people are into what George Harrison says, the I, me, my all through the day. I, me, my, I, me, my, I, me, my. And I didn't want to be part of the problem. I wanted to be part of the solution.
Wow, that's something very big. I mean, to mind comes, I don't know what age you were, but I'm thinking immediately Greta Thunberg, and what she is kind of going through and where she feels like in the same shoes as you, did that awakening or this kind of noticing of privilege, did that, how shall I say, not hurt you, but I feel when I listen to Greta, there is a whole lot of compassion in there and a whole lot of pain that she's not willing to carry on the way she sees the world. Would you say something similar happened to you emotionally, or what kind of really shook you about it when you say privilege?
Well, with privilege, I was brought up in I'm an American, and Americans have a consumer society. And just what we consume it really comes from a lot of it just comes from corporate manipulation and corporate messaging. And so for me, it was just like, why are we buying, like, people are telling us what bands to listen to, what stuff to buy. And it just all seemed, it just all seemed a little just seemed very superficial and like sleepwalking to me.
Yeah. What age?
And so the pain of waking up is like, you know, I mean, anyone that has a child or spends time with children and they're like, tell me what's going on with global warming. It's like, there's a very real, very painful conversation. And that's what it was, except for I was there was a lot of denial because I was a child I was born in 73. So a lot of this was happening in the 80s. In the 1980s, a lot of people were really in denial. I mean, many people are still in denial about the human impact on planet Earth here. In the 80s, like there were forecasts that went to 2020 that shows that like by 2020, we will, the planet will really be experiencing the impacts of global warming. And, more or less, when I think back to those predictive models, it's more or less just, played out the way they thought it was going to play out, which is pretty fascinating just from, science data and modeling then, how accurate it was. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it was like, there is despair, there is anger, there is denial. There's all the stages of, it's basically like the stages of grieving is what any environmentalist goes through. There's these, and I would even say activist goes through. It's like you go through those stages because the vision that you have for what could be, like there's a level of grieving that is not real. And there's the weight of that. There's a weightiness to that. And so I think the power comes. It was interesting when I first started studying Ayurveda, I remember it was about 20 years ago. I remember talking to Dr. John Douillard of lifespa.com. And he was really firm with me about plugging into, the ground of being, essentially, of like being in the place where it is all perfect as it is too right now. And that, in that duality of like, yes, and we better change the way that we're showing up every day.
Yes.
But to really start to reside on a very deep level of consciousness with a sense of the great perfection.
Oh, thank you. You answered the question that was lingering already in my subconsciousness, like the whole conundrum of when we start to awaken and we all trying to work, we don't need to call it awakening, but the people who are very self-conscious and conscious about the world, we're always trying to strive for contentment, and seeing the world as it has to be the way it is, to me that is that. And this is to me the being part, and I feel the tug war of going between what you said, like in one way, the world is as it is, and what am I about to do it, and what are you about to do it, right? I mean, you come now from this idea of an environmentalist, but you are helping people right now. Where is that shift coming in for you? I mean, or where did that come in for you?
Yeah, so I went into basically global warming politics and policy work first, and then got to a realization. And I had done a lot of like on my just sort of like on my own like Taoism studies, and I actually did study Chinese language and went to China to study Chinese political economy, because being the biggest polluter, it was like, oh, I got to deal with the China problem. And so that also brought me into Taoism, into more of an Asian philosophy. And then when I went to work in, basically international environmental politics and policy work, I realized, I just really deep down had the realization that it's like working with human consciousness was going to be the fastest way. Like if humans could become more conscious and could become more connected to their ecosystem, then the NIMBY principle basically takes charge, and NIMBY is not in my backyard. So we don't want to pollute in our own backyard. So as the more we understand that our ecosystem is our backyard, that the entire planet is our backyard, that starts to become activated. So it's like spheres of care, where first people care for, themselves, and then they care for their family, and then they care for their tribe, and then they care for their nation state, and then they can care for like a conglomerate of nation states, and then they care for the whole damn planet, right? It's the same thing with NIMBY, it's like you start to have greater and greater desire to, the higher level of consciousness you have, the more you see the whole earth as your home.
Yeah.
and you start to care. So I was like, I'm going to work directly with human consciousness. And that really brought me into Ayurveda and yoga as
Wow.
to me, the most developed systems of human consciousness.
I am really perplexed. I mean, I always think we're coming from two ends of different sticks, the two of us. When when I hear your evolution, I think about mine, because what I see in you is tremendous courage, like that courage to say, I go to China, the biggest polluter, and I would go I go to the smallest part of the world, and try to fix it out, that way. And you go into the biggest part. This is amazing. So you don't seem to be a person that is easily disheartened, or what is the scoop on that idea that I'm just saying here?
I think too, I mean, I think it does actually go back to privilege. Is like there's part of that accepting of my own privilege was accepting that like I could probably do whatever I wanted. Like I could probably I could probably figure out how to make it happen, just having enough know-how to access resources and people and gain new skills and whatnot. And so, yeah, I think, when I think back to all the little decisions, there definitely was a sense, if I look back, there's just a very strong sense of dharma, a sense of like, if not me, then who? And there's some reason that I'm really interested in this. I'm really interested in bigger solutions. And I also just want to say, like, I constantly surrounded myself with people who were solutions oriented, like people who were big picture thinkers, people who were trying to solve the big problems. And yes, I had to pursue those relationships with those people, and they were interested in me because I was interested in being part of the solution. So there's a little bit of, law of reciprocity of energy that naturally happens there. But yeah, if I hadn't had that, I probably would have been like everyone else and just like, done whatever.
Stroke of luck to be surrounded? I mean, I know these principles because I studied them.
No, it really wasn't luck. Like when I look back, it was very action oriented. So me and my best friend in high school started a group called Students Concerned About Tomorrow. And we really went after finding support for that group and finding, I was thinking about this the other day, actually, just wanting to reach out to one of our advisors who was the librarian at the time, who was really waiting for these privileged white kids to wake up and to become activists. And when we did, she stepped in and she really got us in touch with the superintendent of schools. And our own headmaster was like just totally asleep at the wheel. And we met with him and he was disinterested and just honestly, just like very negative. And so we went above him. And this is a very dominant characteristic of people who are successful, is when they get a no and they know on the inside that they need a yes, is they find the yes in another way. And usually they go above it. They go above where the no is coming from. And I did that first when I was, I think 16 years old. And we found the superintendent was a yes. And he had a mass, he had a whole district of schools. I think there were 6 schools under him. He helped us start recycling in all those 6 schools and do, Earth Day, environmental education programs, and like all the things. And then that put us in touch with with a group called Mass Hope, which was, I lived in a state called Massachusetts, and Hope stood for High Schools Organized to Protect the Earth. So we met other really great leaders there that were inspiring kid leaders and also adult leaders. And then they got us, and actually we got our senator who's Senator John Kerry. He later became, a much bigger player in the U.S. government. But in any case, like, we were able to push ideas through and get a lot of support at, even at our, at our state governance level. And then that set me up to go to a really good college. And then at that college to find people that were really, thinking on this level and needing students to lead the way. Because those programs were actually in the early 90s were pretty underdeveloped compared to what they are right now. So it is a bit of like how one, it's like when you're clear on Dharma and you don't take no for an answer, and you don't look for the easy way in or the easy way out, doors will open and the right people will come forward. but it's persistence and grit.
And you often strike me as a person that is not so highly involved in an emotional playing field, you know, like when I think of Lama Rod Owens, you know, he talks through how he grew into his Dharma as much through his anger, through this emotion, you know, and me being an emotional person, I'm always looking to like, oh, what is that like if you're not emotional, or am I getting you wrong at this point? Was it just your understanding and that, okay, this needs to be done kind of way?
Yeah, I think there was, I think I was angry. I definitely was angry. I would have conversation. My dad likes to play devil's advocate, and he was an international businessman.
Yeah.
And he just was totally unconscious about the effect of humans on the earth. He's much more conscious about it now, which to me indicates a change in culture, especially in in just like liberal thinking and writing that's happened in the last 20, 30 years. But yeah, growing up, it was like I would go to war with him every night at the dinner table and just be like, and was really dealing with someone else's ignorance and denial. And that was cultural at the time too, that like he wasn't any different than, any of the other dads on the street or whatnot. But yeah, I think there is a sense of like, especially, for people who see a better potential that's worth fighting for, like it's a fight. Yeah, it's a fight. Like there's a lot of ignorance to overcome. The yogis are super clear about that, about the overcoming of ignorance, of like waking up from sleepwalking. So to me, that's super fascinating. Like that's always been, that's been happening at least for a few thousand years with humans in relationship to their own consciousness and culture.
Yeah. And we're still not getting it right. I mean, we're trying so hard.
Well, with the devices and all that, with the iPhones and the cell phones and all that, like it seems like it's harder than ever.
It's harder than ever, right? So this is like, I mean, your path still seems like a big, big dharmic path, spiraling forward into building this company that you have, or this support for other people to speak up in their own voices. So multiplying voices as a domino effect, so to speak, or not, I don't even want to say pyramid, but like, to make it, to double up the frequency. Where would you have thought like, you want to turn back? Where was that point where you maybe felt you were way out of your depth, or where were you thinking I should have done this differently? Is there a point in this journey?
I mean, the only, when I really look back, I think I would have had a much bigger impact if I had studied business earlier. So that, and yet it's like, who knows? Like it's so, I'm not even sure if that's true, because I've always been studying something. And so that means I wouldn't have been studying something else, which means that I wouldn't have been studying consciousness studies and yoga and Ayurveda, because that really dominated a lot of my mid-20s through 30s. And I went hardcore into understanding yoga and yoga therapy and yoga philosophy and Ayurvedic medicine, and really working with a lot of people. So a lot of applied knowledge and helping people and understanding how bodies work and how consciousness works and habits work, and how do you actually help someone shift, help their family shift? How do you activate someone into a community healer? Like there's a lot of learning in there. But I do wish I had learned a lot more around business and growing an online company, growing a team, managing a team, learning strategy earlier, just because the impact would have been much greater, much sooner. But I also look at, I'm 47 years old and I have some sick skills, and I have a lot of life left. So, there's not really a point of like, I don't know. I haven't spent much time wandering around.
Your path was pretty much carved for you, right? It sounds a little bit like that.
Yeah, I mean, from the inside out, not from the outside in. Like there was, each of the steps that I took were fairly counterculture at the time. Like I went to a college that was very expensive, and then out of college, I took a job that I was grossly underpaid. to do that kind of work, you know? So like it was, you know, I could barely, you know, do anything besides like eat and, you know, work and live on that. But it was very meaningful work. And it was it was really super great experience. And they actually let me, this is crazy, but in 1996, they let me telecommute. So at that point I started working virtually, which was just so far ahead of the curve, but I had seen it I had a very techie family. And I had just sort of seen like, hey, this kind of, I needed the internet to work. And that was really about it. I was doing a lot of research and communicating that research. And so I was able to do that, which was again, a little bit counterculture at the time. And then, you know, to go and study Ayurveda and yoga full time. And I waited tables to pay my way through that. After, you know, having a degree when most of my friends were going on to law school or getting their MBAs or becoming doctors, you know, definitely going into advanced professional degrees, you know, and I was like, I got to go study yoga and do these 4-hour pranayama classes and study the Bhagavad Gita and like, and start to really understand, you know, spirituality and humans and consciousness and then studying Ayurveda, because basically Ayurveda understood the body. And I felt like the more people could, you know, it's like the ecosystem starts in the body. Someone's relationship to the ecosystem always starts with their relationship to the ecosystem of their own physiology. So I knew that, like, I knew enough to know that, like, you got to own yourself if you're going to start to own your ecosystem, if you're going to own your backyard, like if you're really going to take ownership over how things are and being part of the solution, start with the body, start with yourself. In Ayurveda, like I did a lot of research because again, I had the background in China and Chinese, and you know, for me not to go into Chinese medicine and to choose to go into Ayurveda was again, just like really looking for what is going to answer these deeper questions. What's going to get
so
to the
radical, Cate, because, you know, at the time when I started studying Ayurveda, a lot of the people didn't know how to bring forth the method, you know, because everybody perceives TCM as being more tangible in a way. You know, there is needles, and then there is so many herbs, and there are more Chinese people in each town and city, and you have much more access to it, and sometimes you see the results quicker almost, I would say. You know, you can have an Ayurvedic massage and you can also have Ayurvedic herbs, but a lot of people studied Ayurveda initially and moved to TCM because they felt they couldn't bring their business forward or they weren't trusted enough. Why did you go against that grain? Let's say that. Why did you go?
Yeah, because I was looking for truth. I mean, I was looking for what helps humans become more conscious. Like how, because my whole movement from from international environmental politics into natural health was based on like, how do humans become more conscious? How do we take better care of ourselves and therefore our ecosystem? And so from that lens, Ayurveda was second to none. And it's not because Chinese medicine doesn't have that. It's just the way that it mimicked a Western allopathic model of medicine, the white coat, the doctor knows best, all that. TCM, traditional Chinese medicine, mimicked that path in order to get licensure and acceptance, and it worked. And it created a stable career path for people that wanted to practice traditional Chinese medicine. I knew I needed to help humans become more embodied and more conscious. And so from that lens, Ayurveda was kind of the Wild West of that, like where, there's no one really demonstrating a good career with it. Like that was not demonstrated. So there was no, like, oh, you go to law school, you become a lawyer, you go to med school, you become a doctor. It's not like you go to Ayurveda school and there's a career path. And the same thing was true with yoga teachers at the time. And I was in San Francisco then, where like yoga was way more developed there than anywhere else in the United States.
Or in Europe.
That in New York. And, there were a few people kind of making not okay living as yoga teachers, like not compared to me growing up with my dad being an international businessman and having friends that are like doctors and lawyers at this point. It was like, no, like this is more or less like a good lifestyle at about, median poverty to median income. Where you're just getting by, being super educated and just getting by. That was really well demonstrated by a few people. So I just pressed on, and I knew how to have a very high quality of life on not a lot of money. And I was more interested in and knowledge and wisdom than material riches.
One of your fondest moments in kind of going through your education in Ayurveda, is there one you can recall?
Yeah, really the acceptance of my constitution, I think, was a big one. Like there was and for me, it was around kapha. Like for people, like there's this level of like, not like wanting things to be other than they are, right? At a very deep level. And so prakriti, our constitution, is like, what is your constellation of the elements or of the forces that make up those elements? And for me, there was, and I have a Jewish side and I have a Catholic side. And the Jewish side I come from is very dense, is very heavy, tends towards obesity. And I had, at the time, I was struggling with ama, which is accumulated waste in the body. I was struggling with symptoms of kapha, of like the toxicity of that, of that waste and the stagnation in my body. And I was a little bit overweight. Compared to where I am now, I was probably 10, 15 pounds heavier. And all that was, it was like a very strong muscularly, but like there was a lot of waste in my body. And there was this level of realizing like, okay, my constitution is pitta kapha. My mind is pitta, which is more of the fiery focused overachiever. And my body is very dense and stable. And those are the qualities of kapha. And there's a softness to it. Like there's, even though I'm more earthy than watery, there's still like a bit of a softness to my face. I'm not that angular. And there's this level of like, this is who I am. And learn, like be fully in who you are, be fully in your constitution. And I don't think I internalized that all at once, but there was a beginning of a level of acceptance. And when I look back on that, what I really see was that I had been raised in a culture as a female in Western culture of self-loathing. I had learned to hate my body really young. My beautiful, athletic, strong, smart body, I had been entrained to self-loathe. And so there was part of that in that too, of, just, and I actually think that took maybe another 15 years to really come out the other side of, through teaching Ayurveda and through teaching yoga, being in yoga, leading yoga teacher trainings and, being in, yoga classrooms and tights and a tank top, where my body's very exposed, and showing people, demonstrating with my body a lot, and slowly over time releasing that ama. And once the ama is gone, the loathing and the self-ama are very connected. They're very tied together. And so once that physical manifestation of the toxicity is gone, like I was left with a realization and reflection of like, oh, that's what that all was. That's so stupid. Like, it's what a waste. It's so energetically inefficient to like entrain our young girls to hate themselves. Like, wow.
I'm sure you haven't listened to many of my series, but I interviewed somebody called Jessica Sanders. She's in her 20s, and she came across the very same knowledge and acknowledging that why do we women hate our bodies so much? Why can we not accept all the forms that we come in with? And she wrote this beautiful book, Love Your Body for Teenagers, which I kind of purchased for my daughter, and she really, she loved it immediately. She could, she saw all the details, not only the different skin colors, but, how the skin itself is different for people or from the girls in the drawings. And yeah, there is very little work around that, and we all have to come to our own light in that way, or we needed to. I think your and my generation, so we're not so far apart anyway. So we needed to go through that and find all these methods to love our body. Absolutely, yeah. I totally sympathize with what you're saying, and I feel connected to that as much as. To Jessica's work, where she kind of shows up and does that. She just kind of brings out a book, and now she brings out a book about like encouraging young boys to have feelings, and to be okay. with that stuff. So super great work. I wish I could, I think I should connect you. It doesn't belong into this
Yeah,
podcast,
do please.
but this is how funny it goes with these conversations. But my last question to you might be, so in this evolution from environmentalist, noticing your own dharma and really pursuing it and studying the things, going through your own shit probably in that sense, like having to do armor, let's call it just armor for that sake, you arrived at a point where you came out with Master of You, which has another level of integrity. And so what was the key element that made you write that book, and what is the vision for you in spreading that method and that work?
Yeah, like a lot of my work with Yogahealer, I would actually even say like all of my work with Yogahealer has come out of this dynamic dialogue. So when I started Yogahealer, I was teaching Ayurvedic people about yoga and yoga people about Ayurveda. I was going back and forth between these two schools. And I naturally found that like in the conversation, these bigger questions would arise, and I'd be like, oh, there's a really easy way to learn that. And I would simplify how to learn that from the way that I had learned it, which I found was like fairly convoluted or complex, excessively complex. And so I naturally had this gift, this pragmatic gift of taking something that's complex and making it really simple and easy and digestible. What happened was, this dialogue evolved over time into these courses and into these books. And at some point, because I did start to focus on building a profitable business, realizing that the more profitable the business was, the more successful it was, the more impact we would have. And so I really started to connect income to impact and get real with that, like not get wishy-washy, but get hard in the numbers with like, what does this actually mean? How big does this idea actually scale? How many lives can we actually impact? How invested do people need to be in order to do that? So I started to become wealthy, essentially. And because I was living the lifestyle, I was very committed to living the life that I wanted to live. I've been very committed to that since leaving international environmental politics. I was basically woke up to like, I really want it all. I want to have the impact I want to have, and I want to have the lifestyle I want to have. And I don't want to be a martyr at all. Like I want to thrive. And so I designed my life around my lifestyle, which includes being in the mountains and being at a surf break, and just doing what I wanted to. So being location independent, but also having beautiful homes, and then being a mother and having time, like really having a deep connection with my daughter and with my partner. And so I started to have success on a lot of different levels, success in business and success with impact and just, having the lifestyle that I wanted to. And I also, in terms of my body, like my body seems to get, it's healthy, it's aligned. Like I don't struggle with weight. I don't struggle with things that I've overcome, allergies. I don't struggle with workaholism, like things that I've really overcome in the past. And so many people were just sort of like, how do I have what you have? Essentially, like how do I have my version of what I want based on you knowing how to get your version of what you want? And that became Master of You, where I took the 5 elements of Ayurveda and said that these are powers. And once we understand that these elements themselves are powers that we all have, that we can all develop within ourselves, we can get much better at seeing the vision of who we are, who we want to be next, and actually doing the strategic planning, which looks at the critical issues and developing that into a strategy and bringing that into the field of time, and then dealing with all the stuff that's going to come up when you activate your vision in real time, because stuff will always come up.
Yeah.
And that became Master of You. And it really is a field guide to like, how do you live a life of purpose, of greater purpose? How do you achieve bigger goals? Even if some of them are, might seem selfish, like a wealth goal or a personal happiness goal, or a freedom, lifestyle independence goal. But what I found in working with so many people over time is that like once initial boxes are checked, people really awaken to their greater purpose. Once they have more of their material needs met, then they really get on with a much bigger vision of impact. And that's what that course is it's a field guide too. And I have no judgment, around people that have financial goals. I understand that. And I really understand the value of it. And so a lot of people have come to me because of that, because of setting goals and not hitting them in the past, and really wanting their life to just start to take off on a bigger level.
Yeah. So to me, this is a combination of going into a field of self-trust and intuition, paired with, that element of this is what I need to do, instead of this is the mantra I pray and this is the sangha I follow or the teacher I follow, but really to have radical steps that kind of show you the way. And the way might be first into one direction, and while you're going it might turn a little bit, but that's okay too. This is probably where we all stumble and think like, oh, but my vision was that. So self-driven sometimes, you cannot get stuck with what I noticed with your work we've done together, or you taught me, is that the ego needs to slowly surrender, because if you're following your ego constantly, then you don't get the metrics right, you don't get the numbers, you don't get the targets, you don't get nothing, and you end up in self-sabotaging constantly and hopping from one project to another if you want to. Until you get tired of that. So
it's so true. We had a 2-day workshop on Master of You about 2 weeks ago, and people came and they had this their vision, like this is my goal, this is what I want to do next. And after a day, by the end of day one of deep dive into that, about 80% had significantly pivoted.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's that, I call it unearthing your deeper dream. And like you're saying, to get through these levels of ego or patterning, or what Vishaan Lakhiani of Mind Valley, he calls the bullshit rules of basically falling into what other people want for you or your life or are culturally accepted. And this, this is the thing, is most people listening think, will think oh, I'm free of that. But in a 1-day workshop, most people coming thinking that they're free of that realize that whoa, what they really want, when they can really listen to, like you're saying, to intuition, when they can really get deep and have the time and the focus to actually consider which way are they pointing their ship. Wow. Massive pivots, 10 degrees off is a huge pivot in the destination that you actually arrive at. So if there's a 50-degree pivot, whoa, it's totally different. And so that is a lot of what we do, is slow people down to even being able to process where they actually are now, where they actually want to be in the future, and start to create a better plan on getting there based on the critical issues, the real critical issues that are going to come up. And not what I found in doing a lot of the research for this book and a lot of the training, is not enough people spend the time that's required to actually digest the critical issues and to turn them into focused strategies. And that's very much what Pitta does in the body. And so because I studied Ayurveda and yoga, and I know you can relate to this, Alexandra, it's there's this level of, once you studied universal laws, you see that they apply to health, they apply to parenting, they apply to business, they apply to beauty care, they apply to relationship building. They're universal. They apply to everything. So in a lot of the business strategy planning stuff, I realized was, particularly with the community that I was working with, but it was also super common in business communities, that people weren't taking the time to digest their critical issues. And if we don't do that, we do not create a good strategy. And I realized that particularly in the communities that I work more of, people that want to make a difference, people that are very self-driven to see the world in a way and want to create the world in that better way that they see it, whether that's locally or in their community or in their region, or more on an international level. I realized that if these people really aren't used to this, they're used to dreaming the big dream and making a plan. but that plan has not gone through the digestion process. And so the plan actually isn't a processed plan. It's not that well constructed. And we haven't, just to go back to what you're saying before about the emotional body, there is a huge amount of emotional processing that happens when you process your critical issues. There's a lot of coming up against your own insufficiencies to do what you actually want to do next. And that's real, and it doesn't feel good. There is this level of like, you kind of get used to it. So it's not surprising, just like anyone who's done a lot of yoga, like there's a level of burn that you expect to go through after a while. You get used to that. So it actually is an indicator that you're on the right track. You're getting more real with what is.
Yeah, I mean, there were so many things I could respond to. And the one thing that kind of stuck with me now when you say that is like, part of that digestion process is that we don't trust what you've done all your life now, that we might be going down a path that is not filled with the money arter, but it might be a path that makes us totally happy and in sync with everything, and it will lead to a greater liberation than chasing the big old dreams we get from, you know, wherever we get them in society, you know, from the person who is a little small, you know, guitarist and then becomes the super rock star called Bruce Springsteen or whatever it is, you know, and we're following these role models, and some of them were probably true, but we never looked behind the scene. That's what I feel when I listen to you. And instead we're just seeing the outcome, and we want to be with the outcome and not with what really happened for these people, that they met something inside of themselves and they probably said, F it, I'm gonna go for it, you know, I'm gonna fall apart and fall into the pieces that really resemble myself.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and it goes back to what we started with around like the grit, you know, and being with people that have done what you want to do. Like if you can continually look for those people and find those people, it's huge. I mean, in yoga health coaching, we've had so many enrollment conversations with people that are, you know, failing in they're not failing, but they're just not really able to hit their financial targets as a wellness provider. And here, like wellness is like, if you ask people like what they really, like what they value the most, they actually do value their health the most, because they realize that without that doesn't matter. That's their quality of life. And yet there's people that really struggle to make a good living with that. When we talk to people and we, you know, in a lot of these conversations say, well, I've had a business coach, or I've done an online marketing course, or I've done this or that. And the question is like, did the person teaching that have the result that you wanted?
Yes.
And that's exactly what you're saying in that is, it's like when, you know, you look at someone who's really made it, if that person has the result that you wanted, like get curious, like just like you're doing in this conversation of finding out, you know, what were the hard things that happened behind the scenes. And that coming against your own insufficiency is a constant on a growth path. It's a constant that you aren't who you need to be to do it. You don't have what it takes to get there right now.
It never stops. Yeah.
So you better develop that, and you better find the people that have what it takes and know what you don't know. And that to me is really the benefit. I mean, that's why we create the dynamic groups coaching community that we have at Yogahealers, because it's like we need to be in surround sound with people who've done what we're trying to do.
Yeah, and what you've done instinctively to kind of level up to people that have a vision, a bigger vision, and not be with the ones that are always telling us this can't be, and, you know, no, the old way are the golden ways, and so on and so forth. Yeah, we need that support, definitely. So
yeah, we need the support, the guidance, the advisory. I mean, it's just, I constantly surround myself with people who are where I want to be next. And that's critical. I mean, it's just mission critical, because otherwise, you know, what people end up doing is taking advice and being influenced by people who haven't gotten where they want to go. And that is one of the most inefficient ways to get anywhere that you want to go.
And these people are real. That's what I noticed when I met my first influencers, like friends that I really looked up to. And these people are super real. They know they have to sink, to get back to swimming. And I did a whole thing for your Wellness Pro community yesterday on that subject, like you really need to trust that you have to sink your own ship in order to find your new one, I don't want to say sink your ship, but I mean, to me, it's almost like fun now to let go and sink in and allow the whirlwind of the dark waters to take me,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it's the breakthrough, right?
Yeah.
It's like something has to die for something to be reborn. I mean, there's a reason that things happen in these cycles. And the more we can iterate these cycles, the more it's like, oh, that's normal. That's what that was. Here
and we need to have people around us saying that it's normal, not trying to pretend it all should be cushy and nice and, like
great point,
filled with TV and whatever. So yeah, but maybe there is one sentence, maybe there's one point of advice you want to give to the listeners. I mean, we're pretty much touched upon a lot of advice, but is there one thing you want to say to my listeners?
Unearth your deeper dream.
Yeah.
Like do it. Like it's no joke. You have it for a reason, and it's it's really there to guide your life. And if it's buried 60 feet under, it's time to unearth that. I think there's a free chapter at masterofyou.us. If not, there will be. And so we on just that chapter on unearth your deeper dream. And the reason we picked that, I was like, there's one way I really want to help people now. It's that. It's like you are here to live the best life you can. You are here to make a difference.
Yeah, it's real. The dream is real and it's solid once it comes up. It's more solid than all the other constructions.
So I want to ask you, how has working with me and being in the courses, like how has that affected your deeper dream and what you're living?
It, well, it totally has affected my deeper dream. I didn't know that it was my deeper dream, but I spoke about it quite clearly the other day in an interview with Anna Berkelman from your enrollment team. And at the truth of what I always wanted and was named so many times to people who can read bodies and auras, that I want to be a spokesperson for, for the possibilities of living a life where you really thrive, as you call it, or that there is something in us, there is good in us through and through, that I really want to become that more and more. And I had to go through all the pathways and had to be led until now. That's what it feels like to me. I felt like I needed the Sangha and I needed the teachers, and I never dared to lead myself. So I mean, I'm leading, but only in, I don't even want to say copycat. I'm not finding a good word right now, but I got the permission to pass on methods, and they were true for me at the time, and so it was easy to pass them on. But what I learned from you and in your courses is I credit to you and the work I've done with you the very fact that you liberate people in not falling into those conventional lines, of like, this is one teacher and this teacher knows it all, a little bit, like that, but that at the core of your work is so much giving, and giving into that somebody liberates themselves into their own voice. And I'm not saying that my other teachers didn't want to do that, but it didn't come through for me at all. But with everything you do, it's so giving, like you give these workbooks and we can use them to iterate and reiterate the story. But mainly what I found with the Awake Living then of late, and with the workshops that we've done together, is that, okay, now it's time to really drop the mic and go and do my own thing, just go and don't listen to anybody who has to say and and who is already so wise and strong. I cannot be you, I have to be me, and I have to trust that path now. So yeah.
Oh, I'm so happy to hear that. And I think you're right. That's, that the standing up as a spokesperson and deciding to build your own your own platform and do, you know, and really carry through your own work. It is the most important thing that we can wake up to.
Yeah. And I can
That
only bow
agency.
my head to the bigger lights and the bigger the people like you have bigger courage earlier on to do it, you know, really, you know, to forge the way through the forest. And I can then take heart and think like, oh yeah, she did it, I'm gonna do it too now.
Yeah, totally. If I can do it, you can too. Amen to that.
Yes. So thank you very much for coming on to the show, Cate.
My pleasure, Alex. It's been great.
Yeah, and thank you, listener, for following this conversation. I hope you feel inspired. And yeah, turn towards Cate. I can only highly recommend it, as you can hear, to if you want to ignite beyond. And yeah, see you next time. If you enjoy listening to my podcast, please consider to become a patron at patreon.com/Alexandra Kreis and pledge your donation.